What would you think if I told you that some women don't leave men, they leave the version of themselves they created to survive him? At first, she plays sweet, not because she's insincere, but because it was safer to be small. The world trained her early, softness gets fed, sharpness gets feared. And so, she mastered the art of being digestible, smiling when she wanted to scream, laughing when she felt rage, folding herself into quieter corners so others could feel big. She made herself into a lullaby, a gentle rhythm that soothed masculine egos and silenced her own thunder. But sweetness, when disconnected from truth, becomes suffocation. The soul can only be subdued for so long before it starts to rot. And in that decay, something stirs. Something ancient, something wild, something young called the shadow, the disowned self, the suppressed raw, the woman she left behind. When she begins to feel it rise, it doesn't look like rebellion. Not at first. It looks like fatigue, like silence, like a gaze that no longer sparkles for his approval. The woman who once danced on the eggshells of his moods now stops moving. Stops over-explaining, stops decorating her discomfort with grace. And he feels it, not in her words, but in the way she no longer shields him from the mirror. Because when a woman stops playing sweet, she becomes a mirror, clean, unfiltered, merciless. The kind of mirror a man avoids when he knows his power was built on her pretending not to see. You've seen it, maybe you've been it, that man who first adored her glow, only to panic when she stopped using it to warm him. The moment she goes quiet, the air thickens. Because he knows, she's about to become someone he can no longer control. This is not cruelty, it is emergence. A woman, returning to herself, is not becoming mean, she's becoming real. And the realness burns through the illusions they both relied on. The illusion that pleasing equals love. That being agreeable earns safety. That if she bends enough, she'll be chosen. But you see, the feminine doesn't bloom under control. It blooms under truth. And when that truth awakens, it doesn't ask for permission. It asks for integrity. Jung knew this, that when the unconscious becomes conscious, there is no going back. The woman he once held in his arms now holds her own inner world in her hands. And it is heavy with unspoken knowing. She no longer needs him to see her. Because now, she sees herself. And that is the moment many men run. Not because she became dangerous, but because she stopped being convenient. Her silence is no longer submission. It is observation. Her gaze is no longer adoring, it is discerning. And her love is no longer a gift handed freely, but a gate you must walk through with reverence. If a man cannot meet her in his own shadow, he will fear hers. He will mistake her intensity for instability, her standards for punishment, her detachment for coldness. But it is none of these. It is her stepping into individuation, the integration of her fragmented selves. The girl who fawned, the lover who waited, the mother who gave, the witch who warned. All of them, now standing as one. She is not rejecting love. She is redefining its terms. And you, if you are the man watching her shift, you have a choice. You can either meet her with your whole self, or lose her to hers. Because the woman who stops playing sweet has not become hard. She has become whole, and wholeness is not easy to hold. She begins to speak differently now. Not louder, but with precision. The kind of voice that no longer fills silence with apologies or reassurance. She does not explain what you failed to understand. She does not soften her truths for your comfort. The words fall from her lips like ancient bells, clear, resonant, final. There is no vengeance in her. Just velocity. She has turned inward, not away. Because somewhere in the stillness of her undoing, she met the woman she was before the world told her how to be lovable. That meeting was not romantic. It was brutal. She saw the rage of her inner child who learned to beg. The ache of her teenage self who made herself pretty so she wouldn't be abandoned. The hollow joy of her adult self who confused service for devotion. And she grieved. Grief is the prelude to awakening. Carl Jung wrote that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. She saw her fate clearly for the first time, written in patterns, repeated in lovers, echoed in the way she gave more than she had and asked for less than she deserved. That fate had a name, self-erasure. But now, the erasure is reversed. Slowly, her contours return. Boundaries become visible. Desires emerge like bones through skin. And what once terrified her, solitude, rejection, disapproval, becomes sacred. She is no longer seduced by being understood. That was a trap. She sees now that many men only want to understand her enough to use her, to admire her softness without confronting their own sharpness. The moment she shows the fire beneath her water, they shrink, not because she is too much, but because they are still too small. And here's the part most cannot digest, she does not hate him. She simply no longer needs to become smaller so he can feel bigger. The performance is over. The mask is cracked. She does not seek revenge. She seeks reality. And if he cannot offer it, she will not stay, even if the love was once real. Because love without truth is not safety. It's sedation. She is no longer interested in roles, the muse, the healer, the fixer, the good girl. These archetypes kept her frozen in a loop of approval and exhaustion. Now, she invokes the raw feminine, the wild woman, the seer, the queen who knows that peace is more precious than being chosen. And for you, the one who fears this change, it is not too late. But it requires death. The death of your ego as it was. The death of control disguised as connection. The death of your entitlement to her grace while ignoring her grief. She is not leaving because she stopped loving. She is leaving because she started loving herself. Jung saw this clearly, that within every woman is a mirror of the collective unconscious. And when she awakens, she becomes an initiator. Not into pleasure, but into truth. The man who can stand in her fire without flinching will be forged. The man who cannot, will flee, blaming her for the burns his own dishonesty left exposed. She is no longer at war, but she carries the scars of every silence she swallowed to keep the peace. She is done keeping the peace. Now, she becomes it. And peace, real peace, does not mean the absence of storms. It means becoming the eye of the storm, centered, unshakable, aware. This woman, the one who stopped playing sweet, is not a fantasy. She is a force, and if you meet her with reverence, she will not just love you, she will free you. But only if you're ready to meet her in the mirror she no longer hides. She walks differently now, not in haste, not in performance, but with the gravity of someone who has returned from the underworld with the map of her own soul. She no longer moves to attract, she moves to align. And when she steps into a room, she doesn't seek the gaze of others, she commands presence by simply existing in her own. What used to be sweetness has become sovereignty. And still, some will say she's become cold, detached, arrogant, but this is only the discomfort of those who cannot digest a woman who no longer orbits male validation. They mistake boundaries for walls, silence for dismissal, self-respect for threat, because for the first time, she is not shrinking to soothe them. This is where the masculine, if uninitiated, begins to panic. The man who was adored for doing the bare minimum will now feel invisible. His compliments no longer land. His charm no longer melts her. His access has been revoked, not as punishment, but as natural consequence. She has evolved, and evolution always disrupts the familiar. You can feel it, can't you? The shift is subtle at first. She doesn't call as quickly, doesn't rush to rescue you from your own discomfort. She doesn't offer explanations for her boundaries. Her no becomes a full sentence. Her yes is no longer automatic. She pauses, she breathes, she chooses. And the man who once felt like her center suddenly realizes he was a guest in the kingdom she built around his needs. Now, the throne is hers. Not because she seeks to rule over anyone, but because she finally rules over herself. This is the terror and the invitation, the paradox Jung explored again and again, that the feminine, once individuated, ceases to be an object of fantasy and becomes an agent of truth. She will no longer play roles, no longer wear smiles to keep peace, no longer perform softness to avoid abandonment. She has already been abandoned by herself before, and she will never return to that kind of loneliness again. So what happens when a man meets this version of her? He faces himself. He must confront the parts of him that preferred her unawakened. The parts that found comfort in her insecurity. The parts that mistook her kindness for permission, her giving for neediness, her vulnerability for submission. And here lies the masculine crossroad, collapse or rise. He can either cling to outdated power, mocking her growth, accusing her of being too much, retreating into lesser women who still play sweet. Or he can rise into wholeness. To rise means to meet her as an equal, not in control, but in consciousness. To see that her fire does not burn, it illuminates. That her stillness is not withdrawal, it is presence. That her refusal to be manipulated is not resistance, it is discernment. But rising comes at a cost. He must strip of pride, of entitlement, of the illusion that love is earned through performance or power. He must become real, too. Because the woman who no longer plays sweet will never again settle for someone pretending to be strong. She craves not dominance, but depth. Not gestures, but devotion. Not promises, but presence. And the irony? When she finally stops pretending, she becomes everything he claimed to want, but now, she is no longer his to take. She is not bitter. She is beyond bargaining. This is the wisdom of the feminine when fully embodied, a calm that does not chase, a clarity that does not need to explain, and a love that does not beg to be understood. She does not return to smallness. She expands, with or without you. There is a silence in her now that speaks louder than her former laughter ever did. It's not empty, it's sacred. It holds everything she used to give away too quickly, her time, her care, her emotional labor, her yeses that should have been nos. This silence is her sanctuary, and she does not let just anyone inside it. She has learned what Jung warned us all about, that most relationships are not between two people, but between two projections. He wasn't loving her, he was loving the idea of her. The echo of a mother who praised him when he performed. The ghost of a girl who didn't say no. And she wasn't loving him either. She was loving the possibility of finally being chosen, by someone who looked like every man who never truly saw her. But now she sees. And when a woman sees, she doesn't just see others, she sees herself. That is what makes her terrifying. Not because she becomes cruel, but because she becomes incorruptible. No longer baited by breadcrumbs. No longer flattered by surface attention. No longer seduced by the idea that her softness will save him. She is no longer playing sweet because she's no longer playing at all. This is not a performance, it's embodiment. She has done the shadow work. She has held herself in the dark. She has faced the parts of her that once begged for love and whispered instead, "You are already whole." This woman is not a phase. She is not a lesson. She is a threshold. And if a man cannot walk through that threshold with reverence, he is not meant to follow her. She no longer clings. She no longer explains. She no longer argues with projection. She simply withdraws her energy, not as punishment, but as restoration. The woman who once gave endlessly now gives consciously. Her presence is a choice, not a default. Her attention must be earned, not through performance, but through presence. And here lies the quiet heartbreak of the men who meet her too late. They remember the sweetness, but they don't understand the transformation. They call her changed, but it is not change, it is reclamation. She has returned to her original frequency, the one before fear, before fawning, before fragmentation. There are those who will call her heartless. But her heart has never been more intact. It simply no longer opens for unclean hands. She knows what it cost to stitch herself back together, and she will not be broken again for someone else's growth. The woman who stops playing sweet becomes a mirror for men, and not all of them want to be seen. Some want comfort without confrontation. Others want light without heat. But she brings both. She is no longer here to be consumed. She is here to be. And when she chooses to love again, it will not be to fill a void. It will be to amplify wholeness. She does not seek completion. She seeks resonance. She no longer wants to be held by hands that only reach when she begins to drift. She will not be called back into softness by those who fear the fire she carries. Because the woman who becomes real does not become less, she becomes too much for those who remain too little. And she is done apologizing for it. She no longer waits at the threshold of a man's becoming. She has outgrown the role of emotional midwife, coaxing, guiding, healing wounds she did not create. Her love used to be medicine, freely poured into cracked vessels, hoping they'd hold. Now, it is sacred, offered only to those who honor the container. This is not cynicism, it is clarity. Jung taught that the journey of individuation is a shedding, a peeling away of the masks, the coping, the illusions. And she has done it. She has peeled until she bled, sat in rooms of her own unworthiness, walked through deserts of silence with no rescue coming. And in that aloneness, something eternal woke up in her. She realized she is not broken. She was bound by roles, by the mythology of being enough for someone else to feel whole, by the dream that love meant sacrifice, that the highest virtue was staying, that being chosen meant being validated. But now she knows, she is the one who chooses. The sweetness she once performed was survival. Now, it is a choice. Her softness returns, but with discernment. Her warmth is not a lure, it's a frequency. Only those who have met themselves can truly meet her there. She has rewritten the myth. She no longer seeks to be loved for how well she disappears. Now, she asks, can you love me when I'm fully here? And the men who cannot, will call her complicated. But the one who can, the one who has wrestled his own shadow, who has faced the dragons of ego, who has died to comfort and been reborn in truth, he will recognize her not as threat, but as home. He will not try to tame her chaos, but dance with it. He will not flinch at her silence, but honor it. He will not seek to possess her, but protect her freedom. Because he will understand what the world does not, that the woman who stops playing sweet is not difficult, she is divine. She is the embodiment of every woman who swallowed herself to be loved. And now, she is the woman who chooses. Not to perform, not to prove, not to please, but to exist, unapologetically, in her fullness. And when she loves now, it is not to be worthy. It is because she is already whole. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.